So I'll tell you a little bit about what our chapter is, why we're here, why we're doing this. We're Young Americans for Liberty. We're a group of students that have taken the initiative to reach out to our fellow students and talk about the issues that otherwise don't get brought up maybe in the classroom, maybe by the political leadership they follow. So we're going to invite Democrats, Republicans to come and talk about their ideas in an environment that is not hostile. I mean, we're not left, we're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, and we want people to come and talk through things. We've been pretty busy. We've been doing movie screenings, outreach to students by handing out literature. So we've been pretty busy at that. Tonight we have for you Scott from antiwarradio.com, antiwar.com. He does the radio show there. He works out of LA. His show is pretty interesting. I'd encourage you to check it out if you have any sort of similar sentiments. You'll get to see what he stands for tonight and hear a little bit about what the status is and with our country and the war. So anyways, Dr. Woods, he also is pretty important to the movement we're a part of because he has a perspective that's pretty unique among the community of economists in our country. There was a minority group that was calling the recession that we're currently experiencing. Today, there's a lot of economists that seem to think that they're the experts, they can tell us what to do. But my question is usually, where were you 2-3 years ago when these problems were manifesting themselves, or being manifested by others? And that's what Dr. Woods will explain for us tonight. Who's responsible, where it came from, and what we need to do to fix it, and what we could be doing wrong. But in the meantime, we're going to have Scott come up and give you guys a pretty enlightening talk, I think. Scott?
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for having me. Closer, further. Sound all right? I hope you can't see my heart beating through my shirt and my jacket here. Try to make this easy on you. I want to start off, of course, by thanking the Young Americans for Liberty for having me out today. It's an honor to speak with you guys, and of course, especially to be able to have the chance to introduce Dr. Tom Woods to you guys, which I'm really looking forward to at the end of this talk. Hopefully I'll make it go a little faster. And I want to dedicate this speech to Dr. Ron Paul, who I'm so thankful for the yeoman's work that he's done in teaching so many of these young people about liberty. For those of us who've been fans of his for years and years, to see millions and millions turned on to his ideas that we agree with is a real special treat. And so we're really glad for all of you. And the Young Americans for Liberty, the past couple of days I've been in town, have told me that it was Ron Paul and his presidential campaign that helped teach them about liberty and peace. So there's that. All right, now the first thing I have to say may seem a little patronizing and silly, and I don't want to insult anybody, but sometimes I think the simple truths have to be just said in plain English. And the thing I want to get to here is that killing people is wrong. And it's basically as simple as that. And everyone tries to reach for all the different excuses for why there are different exceptions. And I think most of us learn when we're 6 or 7 years old that killing people is wrong, except if it's a war like World War II, where you go put on a green uniform and you kill people, but then you're fighting for your country. And that's different. So if you fly a B-2 and you burn Tokyo to the ground, and as the civilians jump into the river, they're boiled alive by the hundreds of thousands, well, that's just collateral damage, and that's part of serving Uncle Sam and protecting freedom and honor and glory and slogan after slogan. But the truth of the matter actually is already at our fingertips. When Timothy McVeigh called a bunch of innocent men, women, and children at the Oklahoma City bombing collateral damage, our entire society recoiled and said, "How dare you?" And yet, who taught him that phrase? This Army veteran who killed those people that day. Who killed Iraqis in this government's war back in 1991. And so killing people is wrong. And it doesn't matter, actually, if they're Pakistanis or if they're Iraqis. 1 million whom have been killed over the last 6-7 years. Or if you're a Somali, it doesn't matter if you're too far away for Americans to hear you screaming as you burn to death. People are still people, and they got the very same natural right to their own life and liberty as everybody else. And that's why killing them is wrong. Simple as that. Now, I would like to blame everything wrong in the world on Woodrow Wilson. But only because it's all his fault. I don't want to be unfair to anyone. It really is all his fault. And of course, before Woodrow Wilson got us into this country into World War I in 1917, he'd already invaded Mexico twice. He'd already invaded the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. He'd already spread death and destruction across this hemisphere. And yet that wasn't enough. Woodrow Wilson wanted to be a player on the world stage, have his grandiose role in history fulfilled. And so he was determined to lie the people of this country into war, to get us in direct contravention of the soundest advice of George Washington and the rest of the founders, into a war, an internecine battle in Europe between great powers that was none of our business. And at the time that America entered the war, well, first of all, I said it was based on lies. It was the Declaration, it was unprecedented that Wilson actually went to the Congress himself and demanded a declaration of war, based on the theory that the Zimmerman telegram proved that the Germans were plotting with the Mexicans to help them re-invade and conquer the Southwest. Now, the fact that the Germans couldn't get a single ship out of their port apparently was not supposed to be any hindrance to this nefarious plot, and before long, Mexico and the Kaiser would join up, and Utah, Nevada, California, New Mexico, maybe even Texas would be lost forever. We've got to go and save J.P. Morgan's investments right now to stop this. And at the time that America entered the First World War, it was over. It was a stalemate. The battle lines moved inches and feet and yards at a time for years on end. All of the various armies were in states of mutiny and had been refusing to fight. And what Woodrow Wilson did was he tipped the balance against the Germans. And I think most of us actually even learn in our American government schools that the vindictive terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which bankrupted and destroyed the German whole society, really, certainly their state, stripped away major pieces of land on all their borders, set the stage for the rise of the Nazis. Hitler's first beer hall push was in the middle of the hyperinflation. And it failed, but it solidified his role in the Nazi Party. And every speech that most hated of demagogues used to rise to power began with his denunciation of the traitors of 1918 who had signed the Peace Treaty of Versailles and sold out their country. The stab in the back, those of you who remember the Vietnam War era, remember how it was not the Vietnamese who had defended themselves from American invasion, but it was the damn liberals in the media and in America who opposed the war, who stabbed our heroes in the back and caused that defeat. Well, that same kind of myth was prevalent in Germany and pushed by the Nazis above all. Also, you might remember, or maybe not, that the Russian Revolution did not take place in October, but in March of 1917. And Tsar Nicholas had been deposed, and an interim government was led by a man named Alexander Kerensky. And Kerensky was, of course, under major pressure to end the war, to come to peace terms with the Germans. Well, Woodrow Wilson, who cared not one whit for the Russians, was an Anglophile to the core, and his interest in protecting the English was in keeping the Germans divided along two fronts and keeping them fighting the Russians in the east. So he financed, with his brand new Federal Reserve System, a immediate transfer of millions, I believe it was tens of millions of dollars to Alexander Kerensky as a bribe to keep Russia in the war. And so then on their fourth try, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and his sidekick Leon Trotsky were able to seize power in Moscow in October of 1917, and thus create the Soviet Union. This clearly is, already you can see the story of the beginning of World War II, the greatest catastrophe in the history of humanity. 60 million people died. But don't forget, too, that in World War I, the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were destroyed. And the entire Middle East fell into the hands of the British and the French, who drew the borders that we deal with today, who propped up the Hashemite kings that still rule in Saudi Arabia and in Jordan as the American Islamo-fascist puppets today. So then the great calamity comes as the Germans seek to get back what they felt was rightfully theirs, and the Allies, of course, responded and defeated them. And in the wake of World War II, basically the whole world had burned down except America, safe on this side of the ocean. And all the world empires of England and of France and of the Belgians, the Japanese and the Germans all fell into our hands. We got 2/3 of the world, Stalin and the Soviet Union got 1/3, and the Cold War was on. And all through the Cold War, of course, were proxy wars in Southeast Asia, in Africa, fascist dictators of the worst descriptions, backed by the red, white, and blue all over the world. And particularly for matters that we're dealing with now, our inheritance of the Western empires in the Middle East. And one of the first things that happened at the dawn of the Cold War was a move by American Britain to reinstall the fascist Shah Reza Pahlavi in Iran. And in doing so, this set in motion a chain of events that the CIA, even at the time, predicted. And the term blowback, which so many people are familiar with now, thank you to Dr. Ron Paul, was actually invented by the CIA in their paperwork when describing their wonderful success in Iran. And they said, we're going to have some serious blowback coming down the line from this one. And of course, indeed they did. When the Iranian Revolution took place in 1979, Jimmy Carter was asked, well, but didn't we overthrow their government in 1953 and install this hated Shah, this dictator, and his Savak police force? And Jimmy Carter said, that's ancient history. Well, let me ask you, it's been 30-something years. Is Jimmy Carter ancient history to us? What if the Iranians had deposed Jimmy Carter and installed the Ayatollah to rule our country? Would we be over it by now? Maybe. Probably not. It wouldn't seem so long ago at all. The footage was even in color if you watch it on TV. You know? And so, of course, you have endless interventions in the Middle East, including the backing of Saddam Hussein in Iraq to contain the Iranian Revolution. That was the blowback from our dictatorship that we'd installed there. And, of course, then Saddam Hussein got a bit too big for his britches, and we had to occupy Saudi Arabia so that we could contain him, as we had, in fact, successfully contained the Soviet Union for a time. But you notice that the Soviet Union, which is based on the most nonsensical economic theory imaginable, lasted so long. You might wonder whether maybe containment had helped prop the Soviet Union up, when the truth, as we can witness all around us, is that all empires fall. Maybe we should have let them expand. And the era when they finally did themselves in was after the Vietnam War, when the American people were sick and tired of this intervention and didn't want to contain communism anymore. And in fact, they took the opposite policy. And Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, deliberately baited the Soviets into invading Afghanistan, into extending their empire, decided to encourage them to go ahead and start financing and taking on the responsibility for revolutions in South America and in Africa. And the Soviets found themselves with no more money than they ever had, but a lot more responsibilities. And if you ask the Hawks, they'll tell you to this day that it was the Afghan war that broke their back. It very well may be true. very well may be true for us. I'm skipping ahead because the question is, what are we doing in Afghanistan at all? And what we're doing in Afghanistan at all is ostensibly hunting Osama bin Laden, the Saudi exile, who attacked this country on September 11th. And I talked to a young lady who's a member of the Young Americans for Liberty here, and she said, you know, in 2001, I was in 9th grade. I didn't know what was going on. They told me that the attacks came like the planes from the clear blue sky. Obviously, this is the leading edge of a vanguard revolutionary movement of Islamo-fascist terrorists bent on taking over the United States of America. When the truth was exactly the opposite, that it was a last-ditch effort, a Hail Mary pass, an attempt to use an asymmetric tactic, to use judo on America, to trick us into coming and finally invading the Middle East, putting our soldiers on the ground in their sand trap. Osama bin Laden, in his first fatwa that he put out, his declaration of war in 1996, you can read it on the website of PBS, of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. It's called the Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places. And it was not very subtle. And it did not say, we hate you for your Christianity. It did not say, we hate you for your English language, for your R-rated movies, or your electoral process. It said, we hate you because you pay the Israelis to kill Palestinians and occupy their land. We hate you because you have your combat forces on our Holy Arabian Peninsula. We hate you because you back the military dictators of Egypt, of Jordan, of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Yemen, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Pakistan. And what had happened, and the journalism's been done, was there was a big debate among jihadists, the leftovers from America's backing of the Afghan war in the 1980s. Who should we fight? Should we fight in Bosnia? Should we fight in Chechnya? Should we fight in Egypt? Should we fight in Jordan? And Osama bin Laden said, we should fight America. America backs all of our enemies in the Middle East. And the only way we can ever defeat them is if we can bog down America's empire the way we did the Soviets in Afghanistan, bankrupt them, and force them out for good. So he laid a trap. He did the September 11th attack, which was a giant slap in the face to the American people, a dare to come and fight in the land where empires go to die. And we fell for it. And, well, some people fell for it. The vast majority, and certainly our politicians and our entire political class fell for it. We'll show them. Action is in the reaction. Watch this. They said. And as Michael Scheuer, the former chief of the CIA's Bin Laden Hunter unit, said, the Iraq War was simply the hoped-for but unexpected gift to Bin Laden. It was his dream come true that he couldn't imagine. In fact, during the Iraq War, if you believe the Pentagon, according to them, they intercepted communications from real Al-Qaeda hiding away in exile in Pakistan and wannabe Al-Qaeda in Iraq that said, foment a war against Iran. Do everything you can to cause conflict between America and Iran. They're next on our list, those Ayatollahs, those Shiite dogs. How can we bait the Americans and trick them again into taking out another of our enemies while, of course, taking themselves further and further out in the process? And so what happened after September 11th was, instead of having, because Americans saw the attack out of the clear blue sky, because they didn't know the history of all this intervention, they didn't understand why, because of Woodrow Wilson and the excuses for each intervention since his great intervention in the 19-teens, that something like this could happen. And so they accepted the lie that they should be afraid, that they should surrender their liberty. Remember this one? Everything changed. Everything changed on September 11th. And now everything, that's a lot of things. That's everything. Even the Fourth Amendment, even the First, even the Fifth, that says that you can't jail a man without a trial, that you can't torture him to death, like in Amendment number 8. Everything changed. And we went along because we didn't know. And what we needed was to have our attitude inoculated. We needed to understand that the cause of the violence against us was our violence. That the idea that we needed to give up our liberty and have more war would only be counterproductive for the ends that we seek, which is a safe and secure society for everybody. That what we need is peace. And what we need is to lead the world by example, not by killing them and threatening them and promising them worse if they dare to resist us. And now, because we still refuse to internalize this lesson that it's possible for the red, white, and blue to have done something wrong, doesn't justify Osama bin Laden adopting the ethics of the Republican and Democratic parties, that it's okay to kill civilians because they're just collateral damage. But it explains his actions. It's the reason, not the excuse. And if we understand the reason, and if what we care about is our own security and our own liberty, well then, instead of reacting out of fear and reacting out of following the leader-style politics, which supposedly is against what Americans believe in, this land of self-government and liberty, then we can actually be okay. It doesn't have to be like this at all. And yet instead, we continue to let them drive us over the cliff. And as Tom Woods is going to explain to you very soon here, America's broke. And as you realize Americans broke, and you feel it in your own neighborhood, you turn it to C-SPAN and you hear the members of the National Security Council testifying before the Senate saying we're trying to decide whether to bomb Iran or invade and occupy Pakistan. And we've got to inflate some more bills so that we can pay to ship more weapons for the Somalis to use killing each other. And maybe we can help the Ethiopians and the Eritreans help the Somalis kill each other. And maybe we can be like the Soviet Union and find every responsibility in the whole wide world, every dictatorship we'd like to back in the whole wide world, and we'll just give them all a blank check. These are the discussions that are happening in the National Security Council tonight. Barack Obama with his shirt sleeves rolled up and all the serious people at their big oak table. And yet, I think if you guys are grounded at all in the same reality as I am, these people are completely crazy. These people are like the Soviet generals who said, yeah, we'll do Afghanistan, it'll be a piece of cake, and there can't be any consequences that we've ever heard of that we'll have to deal with. It'll be fine. And, you know, you might remember the consequences for the Soviet Union and the people of that land as a result of the collapse of their empire was nothing to celebrate. Their entire division of labor was destroyed. Millions of people starved. Their life expectancy is still lower than it was in 1991 in that country. And that's the danger that we're flirting with here with the collapse of our dollar, with the end of the belief in American currency that still exists around this planet. That's the kind of fire that we're playing with. That's what Osama bin Laden wanted, was for us to go bankrupt and have to leave. And so instead of just doing the right thing and saying, well, geez, we never meant to be an empire in the first place, and rolling back our empire because we shouldn't have one, because we were born in revolt from empire and that isn't our way, we've decided to take him up on his offer and commit the same mass murder-suicide that all empires before us have committed. And I think if we are willing to take the time to detach our emotions from our symbols and our flags and our leaders and just be reasonable and rational and understand individual human action on its individual level, then we'll be able to see the true nature of the problems that we're up against and the true solution. Because after all, if they hate us because we occupy their countries and support their fascist dictatorships, then we're only doing more of the same as the solution to the problem that's created. Then we only face more terrorist attacks. And come on, if George Bush and Dick Cheney had said, listen everybody, 3,000 of you are going to have to die every once in a while, but that's the price we pay, all right? We would have said no. They had to lie. They had to say that the attack came out of the clear blue sky. We would have never accepted that in a million years. And so, you know, all we got to do is just, we don't have to buy into any amazing new philosophies or grandiose ways of doing things. We just have to be willing to examine the truth for what it is and figure out, maybe how to convince others and figure out ways to apply it to our actual situation, which is, again, bankruptcy. And with that, I think my time is up. I'd like to introduce my good friend that I'm only for the first time now getting a chance to meet in person, Tom Woods. He's Dr. Tom Woods, with his PhD from Columbia University. He's a senior fellow at the Ludwig von Mises Institute. He's the author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History, The Church and the Market, Who Killed the Constitution, which he co-authored with Kevin Gutzman. He's the co-editor of an extremely important book, co-edited with Murray Polner, called We Who Dared Say No to War, which is selected essays from throughout American history, from Daniel Webster, taking on James Madison's plan for conscription during the aggressive invasion of Canada in 1812, all the way through the present day and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is excellent, and what a great way to view history from those who opposed aggression and empire and murder, rather than from our very opposite perspective we always learn, which is that our greatest leaders were those who killed the most. And now let me tell you about Meltdown. You can go to your bookstore and look, and you'll see a big melting quarter on the front of a book. And that's Meltdown by Thomas Woods. It's a free market look at how we got into this mess and what we need to do to get out of it. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And now I've interviewed Tom 10 times or more on my radio show, and I always try my very best, although I'm sure I fall short, to play the devil's, no pun intended, advocate when I argue against the libertarian position against central banking. And when I read Meltdown, I would read a paragraph and say, yeah, Tom, but what about this? Oh, next paragraph. I know what you're saying. What about this? And there it is. Every single devil's advocate position I could have possibly thought of is addressed in the book and right where it belongs. And it's all there for you. It's as simple as pie. And Tom is, like Ron Paul, Tom deserves a lot of genius. He is radicalizing an entire new generation of Americans into libertarianism and Austrian economic theory. And that is a beautiful thing, and he deserves a hell of a lot of credit for it. Thomas Woods, author of Meltdown.